Chairman Robert Mondavi. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to talk to you a lot about your life and your wines and your approach to life. I was reading this book here, Seasons of the Vineyard, which is what you co-authored with your wife, Margaret.
That's right. And my wife did 90% of all the work. I did nothing except that I enjoyed the food that she prepared and what her daughter prepared. And of course, she has many recipes in there that my mother had at one time, and she duplicated what my mother had done, and she's done a beautiful job of that.
Well, I have to tell you, the most important thing in the book is what you wrote in the foreword, and you're talking about your approach to eating, your approach to enjoying wine and food. And I think, do you want to recite your line? It's like, eat what you like what you eat.
Definitely. I said, drink what you like what you drink, and enjoy your life in that regard, you know. All of us have definite preferences.
Yeah.
And I think we should, you like best that what you're accustomed to.
Exactly.
If you're brought up, I remember with my mother, I didn't realize how good she was, but I enjoyed her cooking, and everybody enjoyed her cooking. In fact, my father used my mother as a tool to get better relationships with his growers and his bankers. He'd bring them in, them to home to eat, and they loved her food so much. My dad always had a preference. I mean, with the growers, or with the bankers, he always got better consideration because of her cooking.
Yeah.
So you see, a way to a man's heart can be through his food as well. You know, I mean, you all know that.
Yeah, definitely know that. But I should tell the audience how your family got started. Nobody would believe it, that you were born in Minnesota, you know?
I was born in Minnesota, Virginia, Minnesota, 1913. I'll be 85 this on the 18th of this month. Gemini is right, very much so. And frankly, I was there until I was 10 years old. 1923, my father moved us all to California. And the reason he did, he was the secretary of the Italian Club when Prohibition came about in just about 1919. And he was selected to go to California and buy grapes because the people were allowed to make 200 gallons of wine per family.
Right.
And so the Italian people that he knew and many others that he knew wanted to buy grapes to make wine. So they picked him to go to California. He went there in 1919, and after 4 years found that his livelihood was much better being in the grape shipping business, so he moved the entire family over to California, to Lodi, California. And there he went. He located in Lodi because he could travel to Napa and Sonoma, as well as going all the way to Lodi and going down as far south as Fresno. So he always covered the state. And then he knew, because of that, during all those years, in when repeal of Prohibition came about, the end of 33, why, then he came to me at the beginning of 35, was about a little over a year after repeal of Prohibition, and wanted to know what I was going to do. I was at Stanford at that time. I was a junior. And I said, well, Dad, I'm interested in being either a lawyer or a businessman. And then he told me he felt that there was a future in the wine business, and that Napa Valley was the outstanding wine growing region for both red and white table wine.
And this is the, what year is this now?
This was 1935.
And people did not drink wine the way they do now, with cocktails.
Very little. In fact, they knew very little about wine and very little attention in that regard, because it was during Prohibition, except that those were born, we'll say, from Europe, Europeans that came over, where there'd be the Mediterranean group of people, things like that, drank a little, but very little. Other Americans drank practically nothing. Really.
Exactly.
And what they did drink at that time was port cherry muscatel, not table wine, not dry wines.
Right. Well, I think that's what's fascinating to me about your father Cesare is that he was so smart. He went to Minnesota to be an iron worker. Then, just like that, he became an innkeeper. Then, you know, your mother started cooking all this delicious food in the kitchen. Then he, you know, as you said, they wanted to send him to California to buy grapes, and he was so well known as a produce person.
But you have to remember, if you go back further than that, he left Italy when he was very young, 18, 19 years old, came to America to find a new livelihood. So you see, my dad was always had in mind open. He had an open mind.
Was he Gemini too?
No, he was not. No, he was not Gemini. No.
He was fast moving. I mean, he was like always ahead of everything.
Well, he had foresight. You know, there are many visionaries, you know, but few can execute her vision, but he knew how to execute his vision.
And did he meet your mother in Minnesota?
Well, no. In fact, she was his girlfriend in Italy, so after he came here in 1906, he stayed here 2 years, went back, married her, brought her back to America.
Did she have a hard time getting used to Minnesota?
No. The way they went to Minnesota, his brother, an older brother of his, who was killed in the mine, by the way, the ore mines, came here first, and then he talked my father into coming to meet him, and so he met my brother there and worked in the mines, but he only worked in the mines, the iron ore mines, for a year and a half or two because he didn't like it.
Right.
And then he went into the grocery store business, and then eventually he set up a saloon.
Yeah.
Set up a saloon. And then when Prohibition came in 1918, the end of 18, why he closed that down, although everybody said, Chester, keep it open, make a fortune. He said, no. He said he wanted to remain in this country. He didn't want to be exported. You know,
right.
If they were caught doing that, they would export. So he said nothing. He closed it down completely. Then he was shipped, then he went to California to buy grapes. And then he found in 4 years he would be better off moving because he came here, and not only grapes, but then he got into fruits and vegetables as well. So he made his livelihood that way here.
I know that you co-founded the American Institute of Food and Wine with Julia Child.
With that Julia Child and Dick Graff.
How was that? How did that work out?
How did that work out?
I mean, how did that happen?
Well, actually, first of all, I was interested in wine, and when we built the winery here in 1966, we became quite well known because we really had many innovations.
Yeah.
And so I met Julia because we were doing quite an exceptional job in winemaking, and we knew that she was interested in food and all that, and we wanted to meet her. And then we had a cooking classes over here.
Yeah.
And we even had her come and gave a cooking class. But we then also knew Dick Graff, who was interested in wine and also food. And we talked together. We said, why don't we form the American Institute of Wine and Food? Because these go hand in hand. And so we did meet in Santa Barbara, and we decided we formed the American Institute of Wine and Food. And really, I think it did a tremendous amount of good because it helped the world, in fact, it helped raise the cultural image of our country in the eyes of the world, because we began to improve our wine and food tremendously. If you go back 30 years ago, we were unknown.
Yeah.
And wine and food. In fact, our food was not that good, and even our wines were not anywhere near what they are today. Today, our wines belong in the company of the greatest wines of the world. And today, we have certain chefs in here are equal to the finest in the world.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yes. And not only that, what has happened is that America is not bound by tradition like France was, or that Italy, or Spain, or the Japanese, or the Chinese. We began to experiment and with foods, different foods. Some of it was god awful, the preparation, but in taking some of the Pacific Rim seasoning, and taking some of the Chinese, taking some of the, even you take our cooking that we had, you take the Southwest and the Northwest, you take the Southeast, and all these different areas, we began to experiment. And yes, some wasn't very good, but some came exceptionally good, and the Americans wanted good food.
Yeah.
And because of that, all of a sudden we had a few people that we did made outstanding dishes. I mean, great dishes, equal to the finest in the world. And that's what's happened now. We now have, the world is looking at